my question about Bolsonaro is, what's been the impact in just 4 years of him in power? And then let's say he does win. What would 4 more years look like?
You know, so many people that I've been interviewing over the last few years, they just keep bringing up this phrase of policies of death, the policies of death. And it's funny because I've been going back in doing this podcast. I've been going back and listening to interviews I did like his first year in power and in like the days leading up to his inauguration. And they were saying the same thing. And then I went back and said, God, that's what we saw under COVID. Like hundreds of thousands of people died, you know, like completely just terrifying, you know, what do you call it? Response to COVID, just saying that it was just this, you know, it was nothing. It was just a cold. And if you take vaccines, well, they might turn you into a crocodile. So that's just COVID. You've seen this complete deconstruction of state institutions that were there to protect, whether it was the environment or indigenous peoples or health, or for instance, the ministry of the women's ministry is now they combined the women's ministry with the ministry of health, and now they called it the ministry of family. So it's the ministry of human rights, women, sorry, not health, human rights, women, and family. And then they have an evangelical pastor who's been in charge of that for almost the entire time in office. So
that's insane to me. Yeah. I listened to that bit of your podcast, and I'm just like, wow, that is so all this progress, and then just completely rolled back.
Just completely rolled back, and then and this question about, I mean, you know, the Amazon, I think, is the great metaphor. It's the great symbol. And we saw the Amazon fires back the first year. Everybody was up in arms, 2019. This year, it's been worse. The Amazon fires have been worse, but you haven't heard anything about them because there's so much other shit going down that like people just can't handle it. But it's worse than ever. We saw more invasions into indigenous territories than ever. I mean, it's happening in this skyrocketing level. People are actually taking indigenous land and then selling it to other people, to cattle farmers and cattle ranchers. And that's just the Amazon. In fact, my last episode is all about that. But so it's been this complete deconstruction of the state. And then overall, the last thing, and I talk about this as well, is how he's just unleashed this virulent white supremacy, fascism, sexism, homophobia across the country, just like Donald Trump, right? And that has been like this undercurrent throughout his administration. He's basically legitimized it and said, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And so that's 4 years. If he is allowed to stay in office, there was an article that just came out in The Nation, and they talked about this. If he's allowed to stay in office, the destruction of the Amazon is going to be acute. I mean, massive. And then we're going to see more of the same, except for the fact that he's not going to have to say, oh, maybe I'll get elected, whatever else. He can just, you know, roll through what he wants to. Right. So no, it's really concerning what could happen if he stays in office.
I think for people who haven't been paying attention, listening to your podcast has been so eye-opening, at least for me. Like, I've been paying somewhat attention, but the similarities of Trump and Bolsonaro are insane. The evangelical vote, the culture war, the strongman bullshit. And I love the way you explain and you fascism, and the way that fascism, it's more than authoritarianism and a lack of belief in democracy. It does have that strong current of misogyny, of like political violence, I think is something we forget to name when we talk about fascism. Yeah. But like, just all the little stunts, the ways that he hounded a gay lawmaker, the ways that he, you know, is just a total bully, and people love that about him. Yeah. Like, that has been insane. So that culture war piece, how is that resonating with Brazilians every day? Like, how has that even worked? In terms of like reeling them into that idea of the culture war.
I mean, it runs so deep, just like in the States, right? It's run so deep. And that's the thing, is Brazilians and Bolsonaro, the Brazilians really look to the States. I mean, and this is something that people don't really understand, right? Brazil is roughly half the size of South America and has roughly half the population of South America. And Brazilians, when they look to another country to who they emulate and who they really resonate with, they look to the US. I mean, as you know, stop. I know. But even in terms of like style, right? In so many countries in Latin America, men, you're never going to catch them in shorts, you know, or wearing flip-flops or whatever else. But in Brazil, everybody's in shorts, flip-flops. They got their ball caps. Like, this is like, there's so many layers in which
Yeah.
you're looking to the US. And so Trump, he adds this extra layer
I would have been
onto
sure
it.
that Brazil would have based their culture on Uruguay.
Yeah, that's right.
If
That's
only,
the
by the
South.
way, first of all, I just want to underscore, this is a stupid point, but the fact that Brazilians are one of the few Latin Americans that wear shorts is huge. Like, no matter how hot it would get living in Argentina, nobody fucking wears shorts. Just
Totally.
no, it's just not a thing, because it's not, it's like nobody wants to see your legs, and, you know, wear some goddamn pants. Even women, just pants. Or a long skirt, but that's really funny. Sorry.
It doesn't seem like that's big of a deal, but it actually is. Like, that's
no,
a point.
it is weird.
Nobody wears shorts in Cuba either. Like, it was like, you know, you wear slacks and a shirt, a pressed shirt. You manicure your eyebrows. If you're gonna like walk around the block, you better look fly.
Exactly. So the connection, the parallels, the reason why he sees Trump as this huge beacon for everything he does, it's huge. And the culture war, look, it's been deep and it's been growing over, particularly like in the States, it's been growing for the last 30 years, and it's been growing for Brazil for the last 2 decades. And something I bring into the podcast, which is so huge, and we don't get it in the States, is this guy Olavo de Carvalho, who is this philosopher guy who basically he renewed the far right in Brazil, and he's been doing it from Virginia. Like from I mean, he's dead now. He died from COVID earlier this year. But he had this whole philosophy courses in which he was training thousands of Brazilians on his kind of far right ideology, and much of it kind of culture war stuff. Basically, all of it. What do you call it? Conspiracy theorist. But and then taking what we know and then flipping it all up into its head and teaching people how to not have a debate, but actually attack your opponent, because that's so key, right? In culture war, it's so key. In fascism is about how to, like, not just have a conversation and talk about the issues that I stand for and you stand for, but it's actually about no, you are wrong and I am right, and we're going to take you out. And the other thing, Francesca, talking about this question of fascism and these ties between Brazil and the US. This is the whole reason why I wanted to do this podcast, because I wanted to show US reality from within like another country. I wanted us to see that mirror within the United States, because you listen to the podcast and it's not overt, right? But I wanted people to hear the podcast and go, wait, this is really similar to the US. Like, without anybody saying it, I wanted that to just be like this undertone and be like, oh God. And it's real, because here's the thing, regardless of who wins this next election, Bolsonaro has set the country on fire, and he's unleashed this renewed fascism like Brazil hasn't seen in forever, and unleashed this white supremacy that Brazil hasn't seen forever. The number of Nazi, and this is in the podcast, the episode that's released today, but the number of neo-Nazi cells increased roughly 60% under Bolsonaro's first two or 3 years in power. So this is happening. And what does that mean? Let's say Lula comes into power. You can't just put the genie back in the bottle. This stuff is still happening, just like in the States, right? Yeah. All of Trump's crazy, virulent far right supporters, they're still there. They haven't gone anywhere. And so that's what's really concerning, is this isn't just a story about Brazil. It's a story about the US at the same time, right?
I really wanted to bring this in, and it's bizarre, and it happened, I believe a week and a half ago or a week ago, when a Brazilian man attempted to kill the vice president of Argentina, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, and was not successful. But what's interesting, there's a weird, just speaking on like the international way that fascism and fascists and sort of like white supremacists are winking and high-fiving each other. There was an Argentine man in La Plata who was like online praising this Brazilian guy for his attempted assassination. That dude apparently runs a cultural center in La Plata called the Kyle Rittenhouse Cultural Center. So to give you a sense, you're getting, like, again, the triad, the multi, talk about, and people who like hate internationalism. This is white supremacist internationalism right here, where there's a cult Kyle Rittenhouse. I didn't even know that people in Argentina knew about fucking Kyle Rittenhouse. And it's just deeply, deeply scary. So And I also wanted to name that, like, Carvalho is the brains behind a lot of these movements in Brazil. He's Bannon-esque. I mean, Bannon, I guess, wishes he could be Carvalho, and then, or Carvalho. So Bannon, Carvalho, and then like Dugin in Russia, kind of like very ultra nationalist. Again, Dugin's daughter was killed, and I think that car bomb was like actually aimed at him. But just there's a cross-continental sort of patchwork of both fascist politicians and then their thinkers and then their little martyrs.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And you know what? They're linked up with this religion or philosophy called traditionalism, which is this far right philosophy, which I'm not going to get into now because it's super complicated. But there's an amazing book by this professor from the University of Colorado who maps it all out and maps the connections between Bannon. In fact, Bannon and Carvalho, they finally met at the U.S. Embassy in Washington just recently, just a couple of years ago. Yeah. And in fact, that was around the same time that Carvalho went, and he actually went to the CIA. Bolsonaro was the first Brazilian president ever to visit the U.S. CIA. He did that, by the way, before he met with Secret Service in Brazil, just to show you where his allegiance lies, right? But so that's exactly it. It's so good that you brought that up, because you have the thinkers that are kind of trying to push this far right ideology. Then you have kind of these kind of more massive movements. And here's the thing. The idea of fascism, and this is so important, the other reason why I wanted to do this was so that we actually start to talk about what fascism is and understand this. But it's, you know, it's about hate. It's about violent discourse. It's about one charismatic leader and building a movement of people kind of in support of that charismatic leader toward dictatorship. And of course, using kind of fake news, right, and misinformation to try and get, you know, achieve your goals, whatever those might be. And that's kind of what's behind all this stuff, you know? So
yeah,
frightening.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do